CFB Paint back for another episode. We are recapping championship week, and we're going to do a slightly different format. We typically start with a rapid round with such a condensed number of games. I don't know if there's really much to do. If you do the rapid round, there's probably not a whole lot else to cover. So rather than that, we're just going to go into the week that was. We're going to have a heavy focus on kind of those Power 5 conferences. We might mention a few things here and there about the others. But we'll go through that. We'll talk through our picks and be accountable to our picks both straight up and against the number for the week. And then finally, we'll talk through the college football playoffs. That will be a lengthy discussion. Maybe not lengthy, but it's something we certainly want to address. I feel like it's the elephant in the room, but we are going to hold that till the end. So let's jump in. And maybe we go in chronological order on these. So I see that the way that we're listed, I'm going to go ahead and talk Pac-12 title game first. That was Friday night. Man, did you guys catch that game? You guys watch that?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome game. Awesome game. Obviously, look, cards on the table. We know this. I'm a Washington fan in that rivalry, right? Like I'm unabashedly Team Husky, and I had no faith in them to win that game. I thought they were going to get steamrolled. Everyone thought they were going to get steamrolled. 9.5-point underdogs, basically at every sports book. And they came out and dominated the beginning of that game. Now, again, hat tip to Oregon. Hey, you fought back. You got a couple of stops, and you kept you kept yourself in the game. But really, even after Oregon took the lead, as soon as I saw Washington start to move the ball, I was like, okay, Oregon's going to have to keep up, and I'm not sure that they can. It really was outside of 3 or 4 explosive plays from the Oregon passing offense where they had guys open in space, which again, credit to them for doing. I'm not saying like that, and we don't dismiss those, but outside of those 3 or 4 plays, like on a down-to-down basis, they were losing. And this is one of those examples to me that was just really awesome to see a team, rally around each other. Obviously, they got some pieces back, which I felt like heading into this weekend, the talk around Washington was almost so dismissive that people were just like, oh, they've been barely hanging on. This is the week that it all comes crashing down. And it wasn't. And a big part of that, I think, was just that they had their right guys and they were ready to play. They had some defensive personnel, particularly their safeties, come back and play in that game, and they hadn't played in the last couple of games. And you see what a full strength Washington team is capable of. And I don't know why everyone doubted them. I guess I understand. Like, I doubted him, right? Like, I want to rephrase what I just said. I doubted him. I don't know why. I don't know why it was such a surprise to people that team could beat a team they'd already beaten. And it just felt like Oregon was surging. And from the first 2 or 3 drives, like 2, 3 and outs, I think, to start the game, if memory serves me right, for Oregon, it was like, this is a problem for them. This is a problem for Dan Lanning. And man, the one thing that I want to say, like, this is maybe too big picture, but it's just like, I want to see Kalen DeBoer cash this in on the recruiting trail. I don't see that happening as much as I'd want it to. But that is an amazing coaching staff. Those are some really, really, really good players. And that defense deserves a whole lot more credit than it got this year. That defense, I know, gave up some points in some areas, but I mean, there's 2 games where I feel like they won against Oregon's offense at the line of scrimmage, which is just awesome for them. Hat tip to them. Great game, great send-off, a little pour one out for the Pac-12, because I don't know how often you'll see a Pac-12 matchup in the Big Ten championship game or the Big 12 championship game. So it's a little disappointing to see it all end on that note, but what a send-off if it has to be the end. Any other thoughts on that? Sorry, I just went right into my opinions on that because I loved that game. Go ahead.
I'll dive in on it. I full on did not expect Washington to be able to hand the ball off to Dylan Johnson 28 times in the game and take it to Oregon. I know that he's a good running back, and I know that they've had success running at times. It hasn't been like a super one-sided, unbalanced offense where all they do is throw the ball, despite the fact they have excellent wide receivers and an excellent quarterback. I had fallen in love with Oregon over the course of the season, not as a fan, but just as somebody who admires good football, and seeing the way that their defense played and the way that they dominated and controlled games from that side of the ball. I didn't think you were going to be able to run it at him all day. I thought you had to lean all the way into Penix and make him make all the plays, along with Odunze, McMillan, everything they have going on that side. Oh my goodness, just really, really physical from the get-go. And the thing that, like you mentioned, those 2 3-and-outs from Oregon. On the flip side, the drives from Washington weren't like quick, explosive drives necessarily. They were long, sustained, like times melting off the clock sort of drives. And that was where I was just like, oh, this team has what it takes to hold on to the ball if they need to, if they can get up and get a lead. I was one who definitely thought Oregon was going to win this game. The last one was super close and it was at Washington. So it's like, yeah, this is a toss-up as is to me anyhow. And just with the way Washington has found a way to win every game this year, but there were a lot of one possession wins that they had, a lot of one score. And I just thought maybe this team's a little bit weaker than really what the record quite says, but not true at all. They came, they played their best when they needed to, and in the end got it decently comfortable before it closed down to that 34-31. But yeah, really impressive performance and super deserving of everything that they've gotten this season. Excited to see what they do in the playoff against Texas.
Yeah, just you said one thing that I wanted to give another quick shout out. Yeah, Dillon Johnson. I tweeted this. I don't know if you guys saw this, but if you'll remember, he's the one who talked, like, before Mike Leach passes. He was at Mississippi State, and he goes, "Since I am not tough and Mike Leach doesn't want me on this team, I'll be entering the transfer portal." And I love me some Mike Leach. I don't know all the story, what happened behind the scenes, but he's definitely tough. And he's a dude, and I bet you Mississippi State's like, damn, we could use that guy right now. Because he's really good. He earned a lot there. Was he the MVP of the game?
I don't know. I don't know
He could have been. I don't know who they chose. Like, now I can't even remember. I don't know if I even watched the ceremony, but you'd be hard pressed to find any others that were. I mean, maybe it's Penix.
They gave it to Penix.
Penix is a great player too. Like, not taking anything away from him, but yeah, just an impressive effort on the ground from Dillon Johnson.
Yeah, so my thoughts are, I watched that first quarter and I go, cool. This might be a major blowout. Washington might put a freaking stamp on this thing. And then Oregon kept it competitive, but Washington still kept the lead in the first half. And then they get to the 17-20 mark and Washington throws that interception. And I'm like, this is the game right here. This is going to be the game. And crazy enough, I thought it might be the game because Oregon might start to take control. But it wasn't. It was the game in the fact that Bo Nix threw the Heisman away and the ball. I'll be honest. I don't think he's going to win the Heisman. I didn't think he was going to win the Heisman if he won this game. But his chance at the Heisman, he threw that away and the game away when he threw the pick and gave it right back to him and allowed them to score again and keep control of the game. That was the play of the game for me. But this Washington team has been doubted. Yet they've gone through arguably the hardest schedule of the entire country. Like, if you go to strength of record, which actually matters to people, Washington is number one. And depending on who you look at, but most people have Washington as number one in strength of record. They don't have Michigan as number one. They don't have Florida State as number one. They have Washington. And that's because Washington has had the hardest schedule. And the odds right now on Washington winning the national championship are 750 or plus 750. Go make yourself a ton of money if you want to do that and just drop $100 on it. I mean, the worst comes to worst is like, you're out $100. Worst comes to best, you're like, hey, mate, I almost have $1,000 out of this. But like, this team has been doubted and doubted and doubted. And albeit, like, if I was going to pick somebody to win the bowl games right now off the top of my head, I'd pick who they have to play, Texas. But I think that's going to be the best game to watch, the Texas-Washington game. I think the Bama-Michigan game is not that going to be that great. This Washington team is impressive because they can win with defense when the offense can't score. They found ways to win with the running game when they need to, and they found ways to win on Penix's arm. And the fact that if you go and shut down one section of their team, they'll find another way to win is the pinnacle of a champion. That, like, you can't beat a team very easily if you can't. Even if you make them one-sided, they're still going to be successful. And even when their offense wasn't working, they kept themselves in the game against Arizona State. Not that Arizona State's great, but Arizona State's popped up on a few people occasionally and given people a run for their money. So kudos to Washington. Happy for them. I still am. I think those Dan Lanning and Kalen DeBoer are probably two of the best hires in the recent years. I think they're what are they both on year 2 now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that year 2 hire of Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell's a few years ahead, but like who else is on that? In that
Lincoln Riley's on year 2.
Lincoln Riley's in
we'll
it,
see
but
what
I don't know
happens.
if I'd mention him in the same breath as those
I don't
two.
think I mentioned like that's a pretty like those guys hit some home runs on those, and kudos to them. So well done on the evaluation, and well done on changing the culture and bringing in a winning mindset with those coaches.
Yeah, and those players have been through a lot. I think I mentioned it on the broadcast where, they went through Jimmy Lake shoving one of the guys on the sideline and just things being a mess. So good for them. And yeah, they deserve it all. Sorry, Bray, did you have something to add to that?
No, sorry, I was just scratching an itch. You're good.
Oh, okay. I kind of looked down and then saw like, oh, maybe he's got something else to add.
Also,
anything else on that Pac-12 game? Oh, yeah, go.
Out of the 10 years we've had the playoffs, or 11, I don't know how many, it's been 10 years we've had the playoffs now. Who would have picked Washington to have the most appearances in the playoff out of the Pac-12? Like, I don't think anybody would have ever picked that.
Oh, yeah, no one.
No shot.
Yeah, it'd have been Oregon or USC.
Yeah, Oregon showed up
maybe
once.
Stanford at the beginning. Maybe Stanford at the beginning where they had some good seasons but hadn't quite broken through. You could probably say like, oh, they're just a couple of players away or something like that. But no. Chris Peterson gets him there. Kalen DeBoer gets him there. I'm a sucker for like rivalries where I admire or at least respect both coaches. Admire is probably not the right word because I'm about to say some names that I don't admire. But when Jim Harbaugh and Urban Meyer were both at Ohio State and Michigan, I think I may have said that not respectively, but you get the point. Like I was like, oh, that's going to be one that I'm going to tune into every time because I think both coaches are very good coaches. I don't admire them. Let me make that clear again.
He has a shrine to Urban, just FYI, and then he also has a cheating panel in his bedroom.
Right, and I was one that was pretty excited when Hugh Freeze went to Auburn because it was like Hugh Freeze and Nick Saban have had some wars in the past. Hugh Freeze is one of very few people to beat Saban back-to-back years. Mm-hmm. So I'm selfishly excited for that, however long Saban's still in the sport. But Kalen DeBoer and Dan Lanning are going to fight some wars if they're still there. And it's just going to be awesome. So I'm excited for that. I'm glad that rivalry survived all of conference realignment. Sad that others are gone, but a good send-off, good swan song for the Pac-12, if you ask me.
Well, yeah, and I guess one real quick note is, and this kind of question that I posed to you guys, but Pac-12, that was the best conference this year. Are we in agreement on that or no?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it didn't get billed as this is the biggest game, the best conference championship game, but the reason it didn't is because it's there's no point. Nobody's pulling for them. Nobody's got their TV rights. They're not existing after this. But this was the championship game of the biggest conference. So I was glad I got to have it on a Friday where I get to ignore everything else and just focus on it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, I think so. We could probably debate that longer, and we don't need to spend any more time on it. Big game. Congrats to the Huskies. They're moving on to the next. In my head, let's see. Okay, Big 12 should be the next because that was the noon game on Saturday, right? Okay. So, any thoughts on this game? Anyone catch this game?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing.
I mean,
and
same. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I didn't catch all of it. I catched a lot of it, but it was very dominant from the get-go. Ollie Gordon couldn't get going, which is kind of the key for Oklahoma State. I don't know if you've watched them at all this year. Quinn Ewers looks as good as he looked all season. It was very much, to me, a continuation of the Texas Tech game. The one thing you... it's funny to me, the biggest result from this game is just, I hope Xavier Worthy, is right by playoff time. You saw the injury. Didn't appear to be major, but you don't really know until then. But they really did a good job of using every tool that they have. They have such a deep pool of playmakers on that team. And you look at Sanders, the tight end, Worthy, Mitchell, Whittington, even the backs, Baxter. Just, it's so deep. There's so many ways they can hurt you. And Sark put them all on display. And gosh, it would be a nightmare to be the defensive coordinator who's planning for how do I limit, how do I choose, first of all, which ones I'm okay with, and then how do I expect to win those one-on-ones where I need to. Like, I just, this offense is a nightmare. This defense, a nightmare to face. This defense, especially the defensive line, also really troubling to face. Like, they controlled it all game. Nothing left to say except, Texas has found their gear and they're dominating. And if they can keep it rolling, if they don't lose any momentum in the break, they're very well poised for this playoff run.
Yeah, Sark called a masterful game to start this game. Brian, you made a good comment. Like, it felt like the Texas Tech game because it was that sheer dominance that you like want as a fan. You want to see your team dominate on offense and on defense and whatever else, and that's really what it was. Like, they did pull out a lot of trick plays at the beginning to kind of like grab hold of the game and just not let it go. And I think if like you see others, like you saw North Alabama do that against Florida State, and if you're good, you can just make that the way to threaten or the completely annihilate a team. But if you're not, then the team might be able to recover. And Texas is good. They do that to kind of jump on this team, and then they could just and go on cruise control. I mean, Quinn Ewers threw for like 350 yards in the first half. And like you had I remember you had the double reverse touchdown pass. You had the big man touchdown. And you even gifted them 6 points by throwing the pick that got returned back to like the 2-yard line. I mean, it was such an impressive game. I texted my buddy, who's a big Texas fan. I said, this game and last week have got to be such fun games to watch as a Texas fan. And that's why this team scares me and is more lethal to me. And that's why probably I'm in my head. I'm like, that's the team that I think could probably win the national title because they can do it on both sides and look so pretty doing it. Granted, we'll see when they get into a gritty game how it works. I mean, they've already played Bama once in a gritty game, semi-gritty game, but this isn't the same Milroe. We'll be real, and they're not calling the same offense. But like, just Texas was just impressive and fun to watch. And then I know I said this already, but I got to give Sark his due. Like, he called a great game, and I know I've given Sark a hard time and said, hey, I don't trust Sark, but that one he played it just right. And even going to the backups late, like you need to make yourself look impressive because you wanted to get into the playoffs, and you didn't know if you'd get over. You wanted to get in over Bama or whoever was going to win the SEC championship potentially. Like, you had to put on the best show. But golly, I love the fact that they did go to a backup quarterback in the fourth quarter. Like, you could go to Malik Murphy, which is kind of ridiculous. And how many running backs they had in that game? I think they had like 5 or 6 running backs in that game have a carry, which is nuts. Yeah. Anyways, I'm done. I'm gushing over this team. It was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was. I'll give my thoughts too, just real quick. It really felt like 2 possessions in. I was like, okay, this game, unless something drastic changes, and I thought that interception where they returned it back and scored, cashed it in pretty quickly. It's like, okay, maybe then, but then it went right back to like, okay, nope, that was one hiccup, and this game's over. Offensively, defensively, just total annihilation. Like, there's not a whole lot to be said. Oklahoma State has a few good players. Texas has a ton of amazing players. So it was interesting because I think that there was a couple things at play. I agree that they definitely went for style points, but I also think he's like, oh, we've been working on some of these these tricks forever. The throw to gosh, what's his name? T'Vondre Sweat? Am I saying, is that his first name?
I think his name. Yeah, T'Vondre Sweat. Yeah. Okay,
yeah, I was gonna say to the defensive lineman again. The other one, Byron Lewis, already has a touchdown on this season. They mentioned that on it. Yeah, but like I think he was like, hey, we're winning this game. Like, let's reward the players for doing for practicing this the whole time. Now's the time where we can break it out. And it's not one where you're necessarily like, I mean, you probably, there's different schools of thoughts here, but like, I don't know if I necessarily want to be trusting my star defensive tackle to catch a touchdown in a playoff game, unless he's proven routinely that he can catch it cleanly. And T'Vondre Sweat, like, awesome player. he's no Christian Wilkins, and that's like a throwback to, like, do you remember that fake punt that Clemson did versus Oklahoma a few years back where they threw the ball like I think it was like 25 yards down the field to him, and he makes a super athletic grab. It's like, okay, all right, that's different, is what I'm saying here. Is like, so all that to say, yeah, Texas was amazing. Oklahoma State, they were an enigma all year. You're like, which one's going to show up? The one that's going to be really gritty and muck up the game and turn over some, or make some turnovers and cause the game to be kind of sloppy, but in a way that they're comfortable with it being sloppy? Or are they going to be the team that lost 33-7 home against South Alabama, but one that lost 45-3 on the road at UCF? Like, and it's that one that showed up. So again, like, it's one of those ones where Oklahoma State, I think they've got some soul searching to do on, like, kind of what they want to be. I don't feel like they really had as much of an identity, but Texas is rolling. They're looking really sharp these last couple weeks. Yeah, we'll see what they can do. This is really fun. I don't know if you know this, but like, Texas and Washington played in their bowl game last year. Did you guys know that? So there's some familiarity. Like, they know each other.
Well, and it's also fun because Sark coached at Washington too.
Oh, I forgot about that part. Yeah, that's for the storyline people. Me. Yeah, that makes for a fun matchup too. I forgot about that. I forgot that he was head coach there. Any other thoughts on that game? That one felt like just pretty open and shut. Like, Texas is better, and they continue to show it. Oh, I had one more. Sorry, Jatavian Sanders. I think that they threw a bunch of things out there. Again, the game was, I think, in hand enough where it's like, okay, I think they're up by 3 scores, but they start doing some of those more like tight end screens. I think they did one to convert a first down on an earlier drive, but really wanted to put that on film, I think, for people to think about for their future opponents. Be like, how do we account for him, especially with the skill out wide that they have? It's a nightmare to try and stop all of it.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great thing to talk about, because one of the things that they mentioned was like receptions to their wide receivers and outside of everybody else, and it's like the wide receivers have like let me see, actually Sanders had 8 receptions in that game, right? Before that game, he had 30 all season.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And like, he's the person that he has the most. The running back has 25. Other than that, you have Xavier Worthy has 73, A.D. Mitchell has 51, Whittington has 38. Like, you're just throwing to your receivers. It's a 3-man thing. You know who's getting the ball. I'm not covering that 4th receiver at all. But now you got to cover the 4th receiver.
Yeah. No, I completely agreed. Brad, did you have a comment on that, or no?
No. It's just they're putting you in that situation. I can't imagine playing it for them. It'd be a nightmare.
Yeah. I think the way that again, Washington's a scrappy team. We just talked about it. They're gonna do okay in the trenches. I'm a little concerned for their secondary, but you know what makes you feel a whole lot better about having maybe a questionable defense going up against a high-powered offense is a high-powered offense of your own. So that one will be really fun. Looking forward to that. We'll break it down a little bit closer to that game. Let's move on to the SEC Championship, Bama versus Georgia. Now, I will admit, I only saw bits and pieces of this game and have not yet watched it start to finish. So I'm probably not as qualified to talk through all of this game. So I don't know if anyone else caught that, or
I can jump in. I caught the majority of this game. This is an interesting one because it looked like there was just at times like it just kind of flipped who was controlling. It didn't feel like it was a constant grind against each other, if that makes sense. Like, it felt like at times Alabama's defensive line just dominated. Carson Beck was not in the comfortable groove that he's been able to be in for most of the season. He still made some good throws, still made some big plays, but like, we have seen him play exceptionally well throughout the season. And I don't know what the injuries were because I don't pay as close attention to the Georgia football program as perhaps a Georgia football fan. There are lots of whispers about, Lab McConkey's kind of banged up. Brock Bowers kind of banged up. I don't know to what degree that plays into this situation, but Alabama was constantly in the backfield harassing Carson Beck. They were getting sacks. They were moving him off his mark. making his life way harder than it's been up to this point. A big miss for Georgia in the game is not having Amarius Mims, because at that left tackle spot, they were completely exposed. And that was a matchup that they could not find a way to win. And so you're game planning around that the whole game, whether it's running or passing, that's an issue. But you also had some just ugly parts of this game. The reverse attempt or I should say end around, they do a play action end around Georgia, and I don't know what happens with that handoff. It felt like Carson Beck just like let go of the ball and expected that guy was going to grab it out of midair. Yeah, super unclear what was there's going for there. But like not the clean game that if you just listen to talking heads afterwards, like they'll be like, oh, this is a dominant game by 2. No, these two teams did not play incredibly well. They played okay. I don't think either of them was playing their best football, honestly, in this game. But Alabama got control of this one pretty fast. And with the advantage you had on the defensive line, it made that deficit really hard to come back from, because you needed time to be able to give Carson Beck to find, number one on there, Jack Saint, and Lab McConkey, and to find people downfield. And ultimately, just wasn't enough time for them to do that. They were able to close it down a bit, but go ahead. You have some thoughts here.
So, sorry, just a couple. Yeah, you're right. It's Marcus Rosemi, Jack Saint.
Jackson, okay.
On that fake, yeah, I did see that play. I really only saw bits and pieces of it. I got pulled away from. We don't have to get into it. But yeah, I think he was so focused on looking and acting casual that he forgot I have to hand the ball to the guy. Because if you look at the fake, like it's like, it's one of those ones. It's like almost like Chris Winke's back to the goal line. If you've seen that, the Snoop Menace 98-yard one, where it's like he's so casual, like it's like everyone's like, oh, what a fake, but it's almost like when you watch it on the screen, it's like he's clearly faking. Like it's like, or like the Water Boy, where he's like he thinks about faking, but he doesn't. Like, just like he's a little too in his head about like I got to make sure I look cool as a cucumber, so I sell it, and they think okay, it was play action. And I don't know if he's supposed to hand it and stick it in his belly, because that clearly doesn't happen. Like,
I don't think that can be it,
or if he's supposed to flip it. I think he's supposed to flip it to him.
Yeah, the thing is, he doesn't he should have known if he was supposed to put it in his belly. Like he should have known immediately to turn around and look for the ball on the ground. But like he doesn't.
Yeah,
turn
it
around
looked
at
like
all.
it was like it's supposed to be a flip. I thought.
Yeah. That's kind of what I assumed too. And then to me, again, I think he's so focused on the fake that is he looking as he flips it? I don't think he is. I think his eyes are the other way, and you think he just kind of lets go of it. It really isn't much of. He didn't put much on it. I think maybe he thought. I don't even remember who the player who's coming around on that play is. Who's coming from the side, but yeah, it just looked like it was maybe a little too much on selling the fake and not quite enough on let's make the exchange and make it be a seamless exchange to the person coming in motion.
Yeah, honestly, like Bama took control of this game, and Georgia pulled their way into it, but just had missed opportunities. You have that fumble that results in a field goal. You have the missed field goal. That's 6-point swing. That wins you the game right there. But also, like you said, Carson Beck didn't look at his numbers up. He only threw the ball 29 times. He's 21 for 29. Like I would have thrown the ball a lot more. You ran the ball 34 times for like 7-8 yards. You're averaging like 2.2 yards a carry. At some point in time, you gotta be like, I don't need to hold you honest. I can start throwing screens to hold you honest if I need to, and just let Beck rip it because he's got an arm. He didn't look as confident, but like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like
bad.
Huh?
I don't think it was a bad Carson Beck game, but it was relative to what we've seen. Like, Alabama was able to make him more uncomfortable than he had been at any other game that I watched, including
also,
tight game against Missouri and Auburn.
I gotta say, Bond, the receiver from Isaiah Bond, he only had 5 catches, but he had himself a drive on one of those things where basically it was Milroe and him playing catch, and that was unreal just to watch them two take over everything. Milroe found his comfort blanket and just kept going to him, and then the flip. Honestly, like the flip as the spy's coming down, that kind of gets around him. It's like Milroe balled out. Like he played well. Like he only completed 13 of his 23 passes, but the 13 that he did complete were timely and just really impressive. So
Yeah, it's crazy. So I don't know if you just when you said like Carson Beck didn't throw the ball enough. He only threw it 29 times. It just makes me smile because I think like when I think of the SEC like throughout history, I would say that that's like 29 times they threw it that much. But and I don't disagree. I think you're absolutely right. Like I'm just saying, it just makes me smile. It's like, oh, football has changed, and then football in that conference to a degree has changed too. Like
yeah, I think Beck should have thrown it more. I mean, like if you get the 35, 36
I
range,
think you're right. No, I'm right there with you. That wasn't what I was saying. It just made me smile. It's like, oh, an SEC championship game where we're like, oh, we're not throwing the ball enough. We only threw it 29 times. Like, only. I think Bama's won that game with like 15 throws at one point. Like, something like that. Different style, different, it just made me chuckle a little bit because I think you're right. But it's just different. Anything else on that one?
I mean, just a last minute, like the timing of the loss is what affects you. In not getting the playoff, you got to feel for Georgia on like that because you played them well. You lost by 3. Bama already lost by way more than that in another game against another team. So like, it sucks.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's one of those things that has always mattered and continues to matter is when you lose, not necessarily, well, I mean, how you lose, I think, also matters too. But like when you lose, like a loss in September is much more easily forgiven than one in November.
Yeah, I follow an analytics guy, and he goes, "You guys are gonna hate me come Sunday when he's releasing his analytics." He's like, "I still have Oregon ranked higher than Washington, just over on the sum of their entire year, based off of what I would expect on a head-to-head basis." He's like, "I would expect Oregon to win," and I was like, "That's interesting because like." On a head-to-head basis, you'd expect Georgia probably to win this game more often than not, or Georgia to be the better team than Alabama more often than not. And because they lost once, it's no longer a power rating. It's a where do you pull them? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think we'll wade into those waters a little bit later. Big Ten. Maybe we go with this one first. Big Ten, Michigan versus Iowa. I didn't watch it down in this game, but obviously, as an FSU fan, I was a little preoccupied. But also, I don't think the outcome was really ever in question. By the time it was, 17-0, I think was the score at one point. Yep. I said, we're done here. Like, Iowa can't score that many points if their lives depended on it. And particularly against Michigan's defense, but really against anyone almost. And so I don't know if I had any big takeaways. It seemed like from like what I read that Michigan kind of put that in cruise control. I mean, maybe it wasn't, they didn't come like right out of the gates with play with their hair on fire right from the start. They're more just like, all right, let's get our win. Let's do what we have to do. Let's, rest people. Let's not risk any injuries, not risk any turnovers. Let's just get out of this game healthy and undefeated with a championship and getting into the playoffs. So I don't know if anyone had anything else on that.
In this game, Michigan just had to wait till Iowa messed up. That's literally what happens. Michigan runs back a kick for punt.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
They have Iowa fumbles the ball inside the 10-yard line twice. And they get 2 touchdowns off of that. And that's what puts them up 17. Or they get touchdown and a field goal off of that. That's what puts them up 17-0. So Michigan did nothing to earn the 17-0 win hardly at all. Minus, we'll give you the punt return maybe. So you're up 7-0. But like the touchdown and the fumble and the field goal that comes from you just fumbling it within your 10-yard line, that's rough. And then even Michigan's second field goal. Actually, I'm going to look at this right. Yeah. Every single one of Michigan's points, except for the return, is off of either a turnover or down over or the fact that they've turned the ball over off 4 downs because they're trying to win the game, and they have no longer a field. They have the field of like 40 yards at most, and then twice where it's like within 10 yards. Like that's ridiculous. Like, you basically won the game because Iowa's offense is terrible, not bad but terrible.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
thing. It's just
defense.
there's no chance of Iowa scoring, and so Steven, I'm glad you waited till it was 10 or 17 nothing. When I saw 10-0 at the first quarter, I was like, this is it. They're not
Yeah,
going to score
I
10
didn't
points against
even
Michigan.
I didn't even keep following it after that. I was just kind of like, all right, the
Yeah.
game's over.
Yeah.
I was gonna make the joke that defense wins championships, but Iowa's offense loses games. So sort of like paper beating rock. But
Your own paper beats your rock.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I played rock paper ball.
So yeah, let's talk ACC championship. Obviously, I'm sure we were all watching this game, much more invested in this game. Everyone who listens to this knows we're FSU fans, right? We're not hiding our bias, our agenda, our preference, whatever. Like, we're fans, okay? Like, that's why we love the sport, just because Florida State was our introduction to it. Who wants to take a lead on this one? I can, but I'm worried I'll ramble for forever.
I'll grab it. I won't ramble too much. Not a whole lot going on offense for either of these teams. You got Brock Glenn in at quarterback for Florida State, who misses some throws that are open, has some balls dropped when he does make the throw. The Louisville defensive line played a pretty good game, kept him under duress, and for the most part, for most plays, was able to hold the rushing attack of Florida State, at least through the first half of doing anything big. On the other side, Florida State's defense was super dominant, and what was a top 20 offense, I don't know if it's still considered a top 20 offense power rating wise after this game. Florida State just, Jamari Thrash doesn't have loads of, he gets 5 passes on the day, I think, but doesn't have loads of room. He's stuck pretty locked up with Renardo Green throughout the game. Renardo Green, ends up with incredible PFF grades after this game, and he's had them all season. Been a really good one-on-one defender on the outside. Jawar Jordan doesn't have himself a day. He's been their really good back, and Garendo's been a good deputy in as Jordan's been banged up in the year, and neither of them are able to get going. Jack Plummer had people in his face all day. Braden Fisk and Jared Verse just had a field day against them. And it's a little bit similar to the Iowa Michigan game, except that these teams both had playmakers. They may not have been at the quarterback position, but there were players who could make plays when they got the ball in their hands, and that's what ended up happening. You have a few of those that happen. You have a few field position things that go on, but ultimately you have that Toafili 73-yard run that breaks it open. They're able to convert like the next play from 2 yards out. But it took a Herculean defensive effort from Florida State because they didn't have what they needed on offense to do what they have done throughout the main, portion of the season. Brock Glenn clearly not comfortable, clearly shaken up after an early hit that he had in the first quarter when he took off with the ball. So some of what he had to bring to the table got negated a little bit in that fashion. It ends up being a very, impressive win in terms of your defense had to stand up and get an interception in the end zone when you turn the ball over. But you did everything you needed to do. Like, if you had any questions about this defense, they should be totally erased with this game because nobody has done that to Louisville quite in that fashion. NC State had a really good game against Louisville, to be fair, but not like this. It was a really dominant performance on that side of the ball for Florida State, and just kind of our hands are a little bit tied on offense. Bide our time a bit. We'll have Rodmaker after this. Unfortunate for them that they don't get a chance to test him in the playoffs. So that's my quick summation, if that was quick at all.
Quick enough. Corey?
Yeah, I was watching Florida State, and I was like, Glenn wasn't pulling the ball at the beginning, and I'm like, oh, they're setting him up to pull the ball in the second half. They're kind of doing an idea, kind of like what they're going to try and do, what the defense does. The defense kind of plays a vanilla first half sometimes, and then we'll play a really, really crazy second half. And I thought that's what they were doing. And then when Brock Glenn got hurt, that's when they went to the Wildcat because they were like, all right, we can't run him anymore. We just need to keep running and keep the game going that way. And at one point in time, they just abandoned the pass. Like, they were like, listen, the defense is locking down. We're going to ride and die with this defense and see if we can get it to work. And this defense put up, honestly, one of the best performances I've seen ever as a Florida State fan. I'll have to go back to the 90s when they would shut out teams and stuff like that. but like I don't think I've seen a Florida State team play this well in defense. Um, Mad props to Fuller, who's a defensive coordinator that some of us have questioned. I know I've questioned. I know Bud Elliott has been on his back for a while. He handled that this season amazingly, and I'm interested to see where he goes because I think you pick him up as a head coach somewhere. And also the addition of Patrick Surtain. You just watch how much the receivers or people were catching passes against Florida State early on in the season, and then as the season wore on, you could tell the technique and the way that they had coached the defensive backs had just changed, and it was much more aggressive, much more like attacking. It basically was almost, if you watch the second half of Clemson, that's when the team went into attack gear. If you watch that from the beginning of the season, they don't do that, and then at that point in time, they become an attack team, and it's incredible. Like if you go over what Florida State defense has accomplished, they are number one in opponent completion percentage at 46.8%. The only team that teams complete less percentage, less than 50% on their team against them. They're number one in pass breakups, 77. They're number one on passes defended, which is 87. Their defensive end broke the broke the record for batted balls this year. They also have the fewest turnovers out of any single team in the country this year at 5. So they've been helped by their turnover luck. They're second in sack yardage and third in the nation in sacks. They're fourth in touchdowns allowed, only allowing 8 all year. And fifth in turnover margin at +1 a game. And then if you want to go scoring defense, they're sixth in scoring defense, allowing 16 points per game. The last 8, I think it was 8 opponents, they average 11 points per game. That's insane. That's Iowa good. Let's be real. That's Iowa good, and that's Michigan's defense good. Even though Michigan plays a cupcake of a schedule, that's Ohio State defense good. This is a top tier defense, and you should have a month to figure out an offense that should be successful. The other thing that blows my mind is this. If you go to the 247, I talked about this last week. This is the 20th talented team. They're not. This team head-to-head power ratings should not be even in the conversation for playoffs. They should not be a top 5 team. They should not be a top 10 team. They should not be a top 15 team. They should be in the 20s. But the coaching that was done from this team, or done from these coaches this year, is what made this team amazing and gave them a shot to win any game. And you take the best part of this team out because you were going to give this team a month potentially before a playoff or a bowl game or whatever it is, and you don't let them have that opportunity. And I mean, Josh Pate said it right. You have Norvell, you learn that you have the right coach. But honestly, Florida State fans knew that 7 games ago. So we didn't need this game to see this. But kudos to the defense. I wish the receivers would have caught a few more balls. And do you regret not going for it when you are kneeling the ball on the 21-yard line against Louisville and kneeling the ball on the 19-yard line against Florida? I don't know. But I sure as hell think Norvell runs it up on teams from now on.
Yeah. This is one of those things where you're going to point to it and be like, sorry, you brought this on yourself. You've done that yourself, to quote Obi-Wan talking to Anakin Skywalker. We'll talk about kind of where they are. I don't disagree at all, Corey, with regards to all right, there's going to be some ass whoopings handed out from here on out. I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of, let's put the backups in and hand the ball off. Maybe the backups come in, they'll throw it though. Go ahead.
Can I just say one more thing? And I didn't get to talk about this, but the Tatum Bethune series when Florida State turns the ball over from they
tackled the punter.
Yeah, they move the shield over and don't adjust right, and they let a guy go right through the middle, and the punter gets tackled. Tatum Bethune has the breakup, he has the tackle for 1 yard, and then he has the pick. And I was just like, good heavens.
He took over that series.
Better. Good night.
Yeah, awesome. I've got kind of similar takeaways, so I try not to take too much time here because we're all kind of saying the same thing. I was talking with a buddy ahead of the game, and this is just I remember when I sent my picks to you guys, I felt pretty confident that we would beat Louisville. But I didn't know that at the time I sent those over, there was no word. I don't think we'd even heard word that Tate was like questionable for the game.
Yeah, we didn't know Tate was in.
Not yet.
Yeah, and I obviously wasn't on the last couple of pods, but like I was surprised he went back in that Florida game. Frankly, surprised he went back in. And you know, like we can talk about what protocols completely fall there. I don't know. Like I'm not sitting here throwing like an accusation, but I'm just very surprised that he went out. And I guess it sounds like okay, symptoms. You know, he passed the on-field tests and then symptoms showed up Sunday. Is what you know, journalists that are closer to the program are reporting now. All that to say, oh, hang on, I got to plug in my computer. I thought I had done that. Give me just a second here. Sorry. While I am doing this, the big thing is I was talking to a buddy of mine after we figured out that it might be kind of a 50-50 proposition on which quarterback's going to play. Is it Brock Glenn? Is it Tate Rodemaker? And he's like, dude, how do you feel about it? And I was like, I don't feel good about it. Like, but I did say, like, if we're going to win, you're going to, like, if we win, the story of the game is going to be the defensive line taking over the game. And I feel like that's what it was. I mean, the whole defense played amazing. I'm not trying to take anything away. Totally agree. Tatum Bethune won that series for them, and that was an incredibly important series when they get the ball that close after your defense had really not allowed a whole lot of scoring opportunities for Louisville. Your special teams kind of let you down in that moment. One of few times the special teams has let them down this year. But so the Tatum Bethune series aside, 7 sacks from that defensive line. They made Louisville look so incompetent offensively, and they're not. We know what Jeff Brom can do offensively. We know what he's done offensively with this team, and it's just really impressive. They played like their lives depended on it, and turns out it did. And it's even then it wasn't enough. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. But you knew going into that game that defense played like it had to win the game, and it did. And so I just can't be more impressed with that defensive effort. Yeah, the offense. Hey, it's hard to do things when you're completely one-dimensional and there's really no, it's not like a wonky triple option offense where you're running it every play, but the way that you run it is so wonky that you can run 5 or 6 plays, but there's like variations on how each of those plays play out. It's just not the same. Looking at it early on, it was very clear there were 7 and 8 people in the box for Louisville defensively. So you've got one-on-ones on the outside, sometimes across the board. And that combined with how the referees were letting the defensive backs on both sides play very physical,
Yeah,
which is fine. Like, that's fine. I felt like that was more or less consistent throughout the game. There was a couple that I was like, all right, we got a couple of PIs, and we being Florida State, were awarded a few pass interference calls that I don't think were necessarily called on the other side. So they may have been beneficiaries of 1 or 2 calls that I don't think were quite as consistent. But outside of those 2 or 3, like, I thought both sets of defensive backs were pretty grabby. So you combine like 8 in the box, allowed to play physical on the outside where the one-on-one matchups are, with a shaky quarterback who's not seeing the field very well. And it was just a mess offensively for Florida, right? Or for Florida State. So here's the part, and maybe we just now start to transition into that college football playoff talk. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just say one thing? I saw a tweet from Bruce Feldman. I had to go find it. He said Florida State was the first team in 5 years to hold a Jeff Brom offense for under 200 yards. That's insane.
Yeah, they did great.
Yeah,
they did great. What I was going to say is just like you had like super advantageous numbers on the outside, and Brock Glenn wasn't really able to do anything with it. And yeah, like you said, I don't think he got a ton of help. There's a couple of passes where it's like, look, he's not going to play perfect. He's a true freshman making his first start with the entire season on the line. That's a lot to ask of one person. This is where the team needs to buoy him up. I felt like the receivers kind of let him down. Felt like the offensive line kind of let him down. You know who didn't let him down? Lawrence Toafili. So Toafili is half Samoan. I don't know if you guys know that. His last name means chosen warrior, and he was a chosen warrior on Saturday. Got it done. Ran way more physical than we've seen for most of his career. He's shown flashes of it this year. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. Great win, gutsy win. That to me is football, right? Like that's what football is a team being better than the sum of its parts. And like you said, Corey, when you said it in reference to Washington, but when one part of the team isn't operating at full capacity, or the other team has taken away maybe what you do best, how do you navigate that? How do you answer that and find ways to be successful still? Florida State embodies that to me, and it really is just a complete disaster that they're not in the college football playoff. Like that's it. I my I'm pissed, right? Like I'll just go ahead and start. It's just unbelievable. It's something that I'm gonna struggle to keep my composure here, just because um, it's really unprecedented and really I think unwarranted that they were left out. And really, who I want to call out is everyone who said win and you're in, and then changed over the last, even after games were complete. Like that's when the opinions started changing. I think that's nonsense. And so that part to me is just, that team deserved it. They earned it. They won it. And for them to be robbed of it really, really sticks in my craw. Like I think it's nonsense. I am doing my best to like keep this thing family friendly still. But yeah, it's really disappointing that a bunch of suits decided that the people in the shoulder pads and in the helmets aren't able to settle it on the field, because some of this had already been settled. And I know we've only been doing this podcast 2 years, right? The second that the college football playoff was introduced, I think I mentioned to you guys that there's some red flags here. Because if you'll remember, the problem with the BCS system wasn't the computers. People, would sometimes say, oh, the computers are so weird, they put this team that lost in front of that team, right? Well, we're getting that anyway. But anyway, like the big problem was that it was too restrictive, that there was two teams, right? You always had a third team, not always, but there are specific scenarios where you had a third team that was likely deserving and didn't get a chance. The Boise States of the world, like how many times did they finish at 3 or 4 with an undefeated record, beat someone in a big bowl game, and walk away with nothing? Like, not only that, like Auburn to me, like Auburn in 2007, 2000, no, it's got to have been earlier than that.
2003 in my head.
Okay. Anyway, early 2000s. Them, was it? Who else was in it? Was it USC and Oklahoma? I think it must have been.
It's not 2003. I got it wrong.
Anyway, I remember I had a good buddy that was in all my classes, Auburn family through and through, and he was just like, just absolutely beside himself that they didn't get a chance to play. So expanding to 4 is great. Changing the selection process from saying, okay, we're going to rank these teams, which again, I'm not necessarily advocating for all of it being computers, but I do like that the computers don't recognize logos. Like, but the biggest thing is like with 4, I think you're kind of almost there. I don't know if we're like 12 to me is too many, right? 8 sounds like the sweet spot maybe, but with 4, again, the complaints weren't how it was done, it was how many. And when they changed both, I just saw it as this red flag of like, this seems like this is orchestrated to keep the powers that be up there. And the number of times that a G5 team finished in the top 4 with the BCS system, it only happened once with this playoff. So, and to me, having the broadcast partner of the playoff committee rankings releases be so tightly knit, I think it's nonsense. I think that, and I don't even know if it's possible, but the sport has to wrestle itself away from the media executives. It has to pull itself back, take control, and say, no, this is how things are going to go, because they're ruining the sport. And I hate it for the entire Florida State organization. I hate it for the players, hate it for the coaches. They did everything right, and they're right. They got they got screwed out of an opportunity to play for a national championship. And the funny thing is, like, I can say that, and I can say at the same time, like, would they be favored against any of the 4 teams that are in? No. But just like I said earlier in this podcast, Washington wasn't favored to beat Oregon. Everyone knew that Oregon was going to win that game. Everyone did. And they didn't. And that's the point. That's the point, is that you can't sit here and say, oh, well, just because we're really confident, I don't even care how really confident you are. If someone has earned the right to be in there, gone undefeated, and I'm at the point where I'm just like, I don't even want to put Power 5 label on it. Like, I'm down to like UCF went undefeated 2 years in a row. All right. I'm giving them titles on both of them because I think it's crap that they didn't get a chance to. Like Cincinnati, same deal. They went in the one time, all right, they lost that one. But the year before that, they went undefeated and didn't get a crack at it. And so it's like, I just can't get behind a system where like the whole point of it is to determine a champion. And we know some of the things. I'm going to finish on this and I'll let you guys have your piece. But you've got 4 spots, right? You have 3 undefeated Power 5 champions, which again, that to me doesn't mean as much, right? Like, I don't know if we're considering Liberty really strongly here, but like they are an undefeated team, right? Like that's not, if it's easy, people would do it and people don't. But you've got those 3, and then you've got 2 other Power 5 champions. You've got one that beat the other. This is open and shut. There's just no way that you can leave Florida State out and consider this to be a real college football playoff. And that's the part that's frustrating to me. Seeing so many people say, oh, win and you're in, and then all of a sudden they change their tune. So yeah, naming names, Greg McElroy, Kirk Herbstreit, Josh Pate, like there's a number of other pundits, win and you're in, like, nope, you lied. That's not true. And then now you're acting like it was a fair system, and it wasn't. And I just can't stand it. I got nothing to say to them. I'm done with some of that. I just got, it really is taking the wind out of my sails, this the way this played out. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to figure out what college football fandom and following the sport looks like for me moving forward, because it's really, really disappointing to see it like this. I know it expands to 12. It doesn't undo this injustice, and I feel like now, being on the business end of it, I've got way more compassion for others that have been screwed. I got way more, just way more like, no, we need to give everyone a chance. My thought behind creating a playoff is that at the start of the season, everyone who's in Division One, you can call it that, and I'm okay with it being slightly more restrictive, but like once you've established what Division One is, what that group is, everyone in theory should have a chance, right? I'm not saying that UMass is going to go win a national championship. What I'm saying is that if they win all their games, they probably should have access to it. And that's the problem. Is like the first year of the playoff, when I'm kind of taking this really big picture, but first year of the playoff, well, first of all, the playoff committees, like, we can talk about the selection. I feel like the SEC short nailed this. They did a really good job of it. But Condoleezza Rice was on that first playoff committee. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are we doing? And she even said, going into the season, I'm looking at 40 teams right now. Well, screw that, man. Like, if you're looking at 40 teams, TCU doesn't get in last year, and everyone's pointing at TCU this year. Like, TCU won the semifinal game, all right? Styles make fights. Okay, they got knocked out by Oregon. Or not by Oregon, excuse me, by Georgia. They beat Michigan. They beat them. And everyone knew that Michigan was going to win that game. It's nonsense. It's dumb. I have to kind of rethink exactly where this sits in my life, because it's something where if we're not going to reward people for going undefeated and playing a tough schedule, again, like when people look at the total record, I'll point this will be my last thing, I'll stop, because I realize I'm gone on quite a rant here. But when they look at like the overall record of FSU's opponents, you realize they're punishing them for playing a bad FBS team in Southern Miss, who went 3-9, and an FCS team in North Alabama. If you pull those out, that record gets a lot closer than these others. It's crap. That's really all I have to say. Like, I think I got all my swearing out earlier, so like I'm done. I'll let you guys kind of say what you want to say about it, but I can't believe it. It's infuriating is I guess the last thing I'll say.
Yeah, I have huge issues with the inconsistency across the book of how you did the rankings starting at week 8. That is the biggest. I mean, there's huge problems here, but that's one of the biggest issues, is that you really screwed Florida State after you told them clearly that they met the criteria to be in, right? You showed prior to this week, Florida State was number 5, number 4. I'm trying to remember where they were.
4.
Number 4.
4.
Texas was number 7. Texas beat Oklahoma State by less than UCF beat Oklahoma State. We learned nothing new about Texas. We learned nothing new about Florida State, except maybe their defense is a little better than I thought before. You saw Tate Rodemaker play against Florida. You already saw what it looks like with that backup quarterback in. He's the one who's going to play in the bowl game. You didn't learn new information here that should either increase your opinion of Texas, in my opinion, or decrease your opinion of Florida State. You've seen Texas do exactly that before. You've seen Florida State do exactly that before. Maybe not quite as impressive because, again, you're not really going to get a good gauge on their offense, but their defense was ungodly in that game against Louisville. How does that switch? And I can tell you exactly how it switches. It's because we need to find a way to put Bama in, and we can't leave out Texas if we put Bama in. And to me, there's a risk reward when you schedule those big out-of-conference games. Texas, Alabama play that game. They played it last year and played it this year. If you win that game, what you have is you're going to be able to have that over the other team when the time comes and when it matters. That's what it is. It's a risk and it's a reward. But in Bama incurred none of the risk from it. They lost that game and should have been 5 in the playoff ranking because they're right beneath the other teams. But to me, you can't even use the argument of who are the best 4 teams, because that's what all these. And I want to throw in Dan Orlovsky as another one of these absolute clowns.
Oh yeah, screw that dude too.
5 days ago and immediately after the North Alabama game says, now we know where this conversation is going to go. This is not a reason that Florida State should be kept out. If they win the next 2, they're in. He said it very definitively, and he's an absolute clown now, pretending like that's not the case and that's not how football works, and even though that's how it's always worked. But Alabama, 7 days prior to this Florida State with their third-string quarterback, I'll call him a backup because the starter truly now is Tate Rodemaker with Jordan Travis out. With their backup quarterback, needed a miracle to beat Auburn. Florida State beat a top 15 Louisville much more convincingly than Alabama beats Auburn. You are not your ceiling. Okay, that's not a fair thing to say about any team. You are not what your ceiling is. You are what you consistently are. And Bama is consistently gettable this year. 3-point win at Arkansas, 10-point loss at home, looking terrible against USF. Granted, you went there for some reason, but you had lots of opportunities to drop games. And the fact is, if you wanted to ensure your spot in there, you needed to beat Texas, and you didn't. And now, because you're part of the SEC, and because there's so much collusion with ESPN and the college football playoff and all that comes together with, Florida State gets screwed over because we think Bama's really good because they beat Georgia, but we can't leave out Texas now, so we need to jump both those teams ahead of Florida State when neither of them are deserving of jumping Florida State in this ranking. It makes no sense. And if you thought this was how it should be, Florida State should have been much lower coming into the week. It's just totally disingenuous the way you did it, and that's what drives me up the wall. The other things I want to point out as far as the ranking goes, we look further down, there's issues with tons of things that went on. But you look at Ole Miss over OU. Those are two-loss teams. OU beat Texas. Ole Miss beat LSU and almost no one else throughout the rest of the year. That was of note. Missouri is also above them. Missouri's best win is against Kansas State. I get they played Georgia close, but Georgia's best win is Missouri, and Georgia actually hasn't beat anyone of super big note. I guess you could say Ole Miss, but I think Ole Miss has just not really played anyone. You know, they really had a tough time with Tulane without Michael Pratt. I think the preseason rankings played into this all the way through to the very end. And it got it totally wrong. Tennessee is still ranked. Tennessee is ranked above Clemson, who beat Notre Dame this year. Tennessee has beat no one this year and has gotten trashed by any team that's any good throughout the entire season. Their best win, I think, is Kentucky. It's just garbage across the board. Like, there was people who are paying attention to college football for this year and didn't know what history was would see this year totally different than what the playoff committee is seeing. Because those rankings made zero sense. They're there to puff up and to bolster the resumes of a Georgia and a Alabama to say that, oh, that Georgia win is very significant, and now they need to jump up 4 spots. We think they're so much better. All of a sudden, they're better than Ohio State. All of a sudden, Texas is also better than Ohio State, who last week we said neither of them are. It's just an absolute sham. It's such an embarrassment. I don't know how these committee members haven't stepped down at this point. It's really an embarrassing scenario. Like, you need to figure out how you're going to do this. Because to me, we don't have a gauge for best team. If best offense isn't best team, best defense isn't best team, you have to be consistent in something. because otherwise I don't know what you are on a week-to-week basis. Best team is what you show on a week-to-week basis to me. And week-to-week, Florida State wins almost always by double digits, not by double digits, but by 2 scores. On very rare occasions, is that not the case? And
how many games do they not cover the spread?
I think they went. It's 8-5 against the spread.
Boston College 8-5. Okay.
I think that's right.
Maybe I had them as more than that, but I was covering more often than that. But yeah,
in the championship game when they were number 4.
Yep.
Yeah, the championship game they were -1, and they covered by 9 points.
Yeah.
Oh, and let's look at some of these other parts of this. Sorry, Corey, I promise I'll give you some time.
I'm not worried about it.
Our inconsistency here, Washington should clearly be the number 1 team. They clearly have the best resume of anybody. They played the toughest schedule for anybody who's undefeated here. I don't understand. Beating Oregon twice is much harder than beating Ohio State once, and Penn State if you want to include that. I don't understand. You have to go through Oregon State. You have to go through Utah. You have a way tougher schedule. USC, another one, who, yeah, I get whatever, but you're also playing the last year's Heisman winner. Like, there are tough aspects of things that they had to do. So it's just a total inconsistency across the board of how we're trying to measure these teams. Michigan had less yards against Iowa than Florida State had with their backup quarterback against Louisville. Granted, Iowa's a better defense than Louisville, but you have J.J. McCarthy, who still threw the ball 30 times. You had Blake Corum, who still ran the ball 16 times. If you're going to say ineptitude and inability to get a first down is going to be a reason to keep somebody out of a playoff, you're not applying that across the board, because everyone agrees Michigan should be in, myself included. I think they should be the number 2 team in the country. But Florida State deserved to be in. They earned it. They deserve the right. And there's no way I can look at it where you can say they're not a best 4 team other than what a Vegas line would say. And Vegas lines are going to go 50-50. So that's going to be wrong. It's just not, you're not going to hit that push every time. In fact, almost all the time, you're not going to. So to me, it's infuriating. And I'm with you with, like, I do have a lot more room in my heart for anybody who's been screwed over even the slightest bit, because it makes no sense. And it makes me feel like, oh, what's the point? It is not a playoff. It's an invitational. It doesn't have a lot of meaning. And we all know all the other bowl games don't. So the postseason altogether is just a sham. And that's the worst part of it.
Yeah, if we're gonna go off of like power ratings and all stuff, we can hand out a national championship trophy after the second portal window closes and after all the recruits sign. Like, I'm not here for that.
My turn?
Yeah.
All you.
I'm just gonna. I mean, we all know there's no logical argument that actually makes sense. The only argument that people will point to is it's the 4 best teams, but even then, it wasn't the 4 best teams, because how would you not include Georgia in the 4 best teams? Every single power rating has Georgia in the 4 best teams, so it's clearly not. So the only lesson that you can take out of this is don't get into business or into bed with someone you can't trust. And being a member of the ACC, being in sports, stuff like that, you got into a playoff that was largely controlled by a very self-centered and self-righteous organization in Disney, and ESPN, and we're gonna reap the rewards. For me, that's the lesson I take myself. Like, I'll be very, very careful with who I trust, especially because you do not control anything in your life, hardly at all. You can control a few things, but in the end, somebody can always screw you over. So just be careful about that crap. I don't know if you guys saw the Bengals put up the most yardage they've ever had with their backup quarterback today. Just FYI, even though Joe Burrow's out, they put up the most yards they have all season. It's just there's no actual sense that anybody can make of this, and that's why it's a joke. But there is no repercussions here. There is no. That's what the sport lacks more than anything else is accountability. And you're not going to get accountability until you organize somewhat like the NFL, where you're not having ESPN control a conference and therefore rooting for a conference. You're having ESPN trying to leverage against a entity in the NFL itself, and the NFL cares about its integrity, and so they review how the referees do. They review how the process is here. Now there are some things where, like, you have the commissioner who everybody thinks might be biased against a player and stuff like that, and so you're still going to have some issues there. But on the whole, you have a little bit more checks and balances, and until that happens, this is going to be what college football is now. And honestly, there's not any reason for the SEC or the Big Ten to want to do that either, because they get huge benefits from being entangled with Fox or ESPN, and get that. So, yeah, I like Steve. I'm like, I don't know if I will watch much college football or what I'll think about it, to be honest. Especially when it's like, it's not fun to enjoy a team that can't even get a chance of its rewards. And that's the other thing is, like, I've read some other people that talk about, like, oh, this would be Florida State against the spread. There's an analyst I really follow that I really respect, and he's like, he made an analysis saying, hey, my analytics see something's going wrong with Florida State, but they don't know their quarterback's out, so I'm going to make a major change to my analytics, and let's say I'm going to drop them. He does a valuation of, like, how much better than they are the average top 25 team. And Florida State's, they're not high. They're like 11th in the list. And he goes, let's drop them, like, significantly. And he goes, I think this is ridiculous how much I'm dropping them, but I'm going to drop them, like, saying that they are only 13 points better than the average team. And not average top 25 team, average team. He's like, I think they're 13 points better than the average team, instead of being like 25 points better than the average team. And he goes, now I'm going to run my spreads and stuff like that. And he goes, I still only have Florida State being a dog by the most is 14.5. Most are about 7 or 10. There's one that's 7, there's one that's 10, and then the other one's 4.5. He's like, I have Florida State being a dog when I overly correct for this significantly, but I had Washington being a dog in that last game by 10 points. And I mean, it's wrong. It's games are played, opportunities should be allowed to be taken and earned, and you have allowed those teams to earn them in the past, and you chose not to, because in reality, the ACC and the ESPN and the SEC kind of had a little bit of collusion. Honestly, Florida State might have made their own bed, though, when they said they want to get out of the ACC, and the Bo Carrington's the chairman of the board over there, saying, you know what, I'll screw Florida State over if they want to leave my conference. It's something that could have happened. Also, the SEC propaganda train got going, and you hear crickets from the ACC. And ESPN's going to, of course, broadcast it because they have a $300 million deal with the SEC. So it's interesting. You're in a conundrum that the group of 5 are, and that's really what you've been reduced to now. It's a group of 5 team, group of 6 now. I don't know. This just becomes a little bit of a. The only other thing that I think that can ever right this is if Florida State investors, now that we have people investing and people paying players and stuff like that, if they were to accuse people of fraud and saying we've invested the money in these situations and put the opportunity here, and you have the definition of fraud is like using deceit for personal gain. If you could prove that Disney and the SEC potentially did this to gain personal gain, you could have a case there. And I think, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't hear anybody talking about that either. So that's a surprise to me as well.
I would kill to see those emails come out. That's one thing where it's like, they've been sending communication. That there's been talking between these two, especially when you look at the way that analysts have flipped in the last week / 2 weeks / 3 weeks. Somebody has given marching orders very clearly.
That's enough information to make me think, okay, something's going on. Why can that get started an investigation potentially? But it doesn't sound like people are doing it. Like, you hear politics going, I demand an explanation, but no one's going like, you know what? Let's open this. Let's go after them. And I don't. Maybe I'm not smart enough to know why, but it's just interesting to me.
I think the politicians are getting into it to score some points with their base, right?
Yeah,
that to me is like,
when Daryl Jackson wasn't allowed to play, they're like, oh, he should be allowed to play, but didn't do anything.
Yeah. I think it's that's some cheap political points for someone who's going to feign outrage. But
why wouldn't Florida State go do that? I mean, you're already costing yourself $2 million by not being in the playoffs. You're potentially $6 million for not being in the championship. Like, why not invest the funds and go and say, listen, let's challenge this a little bit? I don't. It won't right or wrong, and we're gonna get it, and we could potentially get a champion that gets erased. If the cheating allegations are major against Michigan, like it's just interesting.
My point, I think what it is that ends up being sort of a sunk cost, right? Because like it's not going to change what happened. The wheels turn way too slowly. I'm not sure what legal case they really have. Um, but even if let's say they have a really compelling case, like that's going to turn really slowly. You're going to have to prove it,
Yep.
and you're going up against a really big entity there. So like I don't know if I'm like quite like full tinfoil hat on this.
The benefit, Steve, that I think that you get is you get the change that makes football or college
Equitable,
a watchable sport again.
maybe.
Now it's not
Yeah.
watchable for, 20 all but 20 teams.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I sat. Again, I had some conversations heading into the weekend where some people, and I guess it's probably naive of me now looking at it in retrospect, where I don't watch a whole lot of like talk shows, and particularly like the Fox or ESPN. Like I don't watch analysis shows. There's a few podcasts I listen to. There's people whose opinions I respect, but I don't like the Get Up that Stephen A. Smith, whatever, I forget that name of
First
that
Take.
program even. First Take, thank you. I'd forgotten it because I just don't pay any attention to it. I don't listen to any of that. And someone brought up there's talk of FSU being left out, and I just kind of summarily dismissed it. I was like, oh come on, that's not happening. Um, and I guess that was naive of me, but like my point is that I was surprised that they would be this brazen with like I just thought like look, and I'm okay like saying like look, you know what? The SEC historically is the best conference. Lots of things will back that up. Their record against other conferences, typically, not this year, but typically, so like I'm kind of okay with them getting the benefit of the doubt, right? If we have like a couple of 2-loss teams and a few 1-loss teams, and we're really not sure, what the historically what the ACC and Pac-12 champions like are they really good enough? Like that's hey, fair questions if they're like 9-3 or 10-2. Um, I'm fine with them giving them the benefit of the doubt in those circumstances. This one to me was just the most like bold-faced, like no, we're getting someone from that conference in, and it doesn't matter what we have to do it. Um, and that's the worst part is that there aren't ramifications, like you said. There's not accountability, and they will never have to face this as precedent again as the playoff expands. Although I do think it makes it much harder to get an at-large bid if you're not in one of those two conferences. And that's the part that really sucks is that.
Yeah, we're going to see more Ole Misses and more Tennessees in those Big 12.
Yeah, get used to them. Get used to Missouri being in there, and Clemson or Florida State not being in there. And yeah, it's going to be really, really like interesting. And that's the part where, like, as we've talked about conference realignment, like I see it from both perspectives, right? Because I see the sort of the lower half of the sport, meaning like the less often less successful programs, but mostly like what are the less popular programs, like the smaller fan bases getting pushed out. And then I also see it from an FSU perspective where this is like, okay, I have to get in one of those two conferences tomorrow. Like, and so it's just like, I don't know. It's hard to make heads or tails of it because it's just like, I kind of just hate the way the sport's going. And I don't know, maybe some things stabilize when all these changes kind of, when the dust finally settles on, the talks of like, oh yeah, the top 50 or so teams in FBS will just kind of break off and do their own thing. Maybe that works for me. I don't know. All I know is that anyone who's saying that this is the right decision, I just don't think you're being intellectually honest. I don't think you're being, it's clearly in some way self-serving to you. Like that's the other thing is like no one who has any concept of fairness would say that this is okay, and they don't. And so there have been people that have stood up. So I appreciate those people that do. It's just I wish we had a lot more people speaking truth to power.
Yeah, we'll see how many of them keep their jobs on ESPN in the next few years.
All right.
Yeah.
that's enough. Unless anyone else has something else they want to gripe about. Okay. All right. If you made it through that, good on you. Salute. And we will be back next week to kind of talk through bowl season. We will. Oh yeah.
Do we want to talk about our records and against the spread?
I see. And at the start of this, I was like, let's do that first because we're going to go down a rabbit hole, and I knew it. Dang it. Yes, we can do that. Do you want to go first, Corey? You have yours up?
Yeah.
I might need a second to make mine.
I mean, my heart might have been broken, but I think I won the week, potentially. I go 7-3 on my straight up picks, I think, and I think I'll have the best record out of everybody this week. Calling the Bama win. I'm trying to find the. I had this up at one point in time. Where's it at?
I've got it right here.
You got it up?
Yeah, you called the Bama win. You called Boise State.
Yep.
It was another differentiator from the rest of us.
Yeah, I called Boise State.
I think that might have been the only other
Oregon
one.
game. I missed on the
Toledo, Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, Miami, Ohio game, and then I missed on one more.
SMU.
Tulane.
Tulane. But
which, by the way, good on SMU winning with their backup QB on the road. Novel concept, guys.
Yeah, and they don't get locked out. They don't get a Group 5 pick because Liberty just kept winning. Was the exact quote the committee used? Did you see that?
Yeah.
It's funny. Anyways,
hogwash.
I pick against the spread. I go 5-1 this week. I picked UGA versus Bama to be under the 54.5. Actually, was that right? I don't think that's right. What was the Bama UGA score?
27-24. Was that right? Was that the final?
Okay, it was the final.
51.
All right,
Am I doing that math right?
Yeah.
Yep.
UGA is under versus Bama is under. I picked Oklahoma State to cover the 15.5. They did not. And then I picked it under to be under or over 55. It definitely was. Almost Texas by themselves. Washington to cover against Oregon. They did, as they were underdogs by 9.5. I did pick that game to stay under 67 points, which it did as well. And then Michigan and Iowa. Iowa's hit the under now all but 2 times of this year, and I picked the under, and it was 26-0. So the total was 35.5, which I was like, that seems really high. Because Michigan only scores 35 against crappy offenses or crappy defenses. How are they going to score 35 against other defenses or better defenses? Anyway, yeah. So I go 5-1. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I'll follow you up. I went 6-4 on the straight up picks. I was the only one who picked a backup quarterback SMU to get the win over Tulane, so I felt good about that one. Other than that, didn't do great. Real 50-50 week for the most part. On my picks against the spread, I had UNLV at +2.5 against Boise State. That was a loss. Georgia at -6 over Alabama. That was a loss. Florida State -2.5. We did this on a Monday, so it was at the opening line. -2.5 against Louisville. That was a win for me. I had Iowa +23 against Michigan. I just needed one field goal, and I would have at least got a push. SMU +5.5 against Tulane. That was a win. And Texas, Oklahoma State over 55. Cleared easily. It was into close to 70. I think it actually was exactly 70. So 3-3, split even on the week.
Okay. You know how I'm the worst at predicting all this stuff? Yeah, that again. So 5-5 on the week, just straight up. Missed on, I called I called Toledo to beat Miami of Ohio. That didn't happen. I thought UNLV would beat Boise State. That did not happen. I had UGA versus Bama. That did not happen. Tulane lost to SMU. Again, cap tip to the ponies, the Mustangs. Pony up. Good job. Troy won, Michigan won, Florida State won. Okay, yeah. So I think I called out all the ones that I missed there. Picks against the number. I almost you guys didn't even read these, so I'm like, do I really want to read them now?
I went 6-0 this week.
Yeah, exactly. No, did I text them to you? Corey's got the text, so he's got the receipt. So I do have to be honest here. Washington, Oregon over. That did not hit, or over 67. The total there, the final was 65. Georgia -6 versus Bama. That obviously didn't happen either. Troy versus App State under 52.5. Troy themselves scored 49 points. So, no, that one wasn't close either. Louisville FSU under 48.5. My only win of the week.
Oh,
that one I was like, okay, this is going to be an ugly game. Like, I just kind of knew it would be that way where Florida State was going to have to win defensively if they're going to win. And I was like, even if they don't win, I don't think this is one where they like really give the game away. Like, I could see them only scoring 6 points or something like that, but it's like they're probably going to lose at worst like 23-6. Like, I just don't see Louisville really running away with it.
It's a cold, rainy game too. Like most of these
That was
championship
part of
games
it,
are
too,
played
yeah,
in
I was
domes or on
expecting-
turf. This is a weather one.
Yeah. Michigan, Iowa, I had over 35.5. Nope. I just kind of figured that Iowa's defense would get tired because their offense wouldn't be able to stay on the field, and Michigan just didn't do enough. And then I had UNLV covering a 2.5-point spread versus Boise State, and they did not. So not a good week for me from a prediction standpoint, and that is what I'm saying. I'm bad at predicting, and other people are bad at predicting, and that's why you have to have a path to a championship where personal preferences and personal thoughts of what is going to happen and what's most likely to happen don't govern it. That everyone actually has a path to it and actually has a path to it. And I'm going to stop there. Otherwise, I'll go on another 20 minutes. So I will be done. We've been accountable to our numbers now. We'll be back next week. I know maybe we even break this up into, I'm looking at the time, it's an hour and a half. So appreciate everyone who's listened. If you got this far into it, like, you're probably my wife is really who you are. So hi, babe. Outside of that,
hey, your wife actually listens, so
she does, like on like 3x speed, I think.
I
So
like Brian.
I think she picks up like every couple words. I'm kidding. I'm sure she hears it. She's gonna get mad at me for saying that. But
Keep digging.
I'm gonna stop. We'll be back. We'll talk through bowl week next week. On our socials, we'll probably do some sort of contest with our listeners for bowl week, and I think maybe we do something where we do like a bowl pick'em. And I'm thinking about this out loud, so maybe we don't have like a super long discussion on this here. But like if someone beats all three of us, they get some sort of prize. How about that? A reward for winning, huh? That's crazy. Wild that we would do that. But yeah, we'll figure that out. Also, I'm yet to hear my punishment, but let's do that next week for losing the win totals draft, because
You want to do the
we're an hour and a
punishment,
half
or
in.
you want to hear it next week?
I want to hear it. I don't know if I don't know what it consists of, so it's hard for me to answer if I can do it next week too. So like,
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think we have one that's doable next week. So
all right, well, we can announce it and we can plan to do that. Or I don't know if we need to film it. Like I'm in the dark there. So, all right. Anyway, we're signing off. This has been CFB Paint. We appreciate you listening. Go Noles. Not ashamed of that team at all. My wife, sorry, I'm going to give 2 more minutes here. My wife was like, do you even want to wear stuff like that? People are just going to say stuff to you. And I was like, I'm not ashamed of that team at all. And she also like asked, I was like watching like the cinematic recap that FSU puts out. And she's like, are you just torturing yourself? I was like, no, I'm proud of that team. Team did everything they could have. Like, what else do you want them to do? Like, so yeah, you're going to see me rocking my FSU gear probably more than I have in the past, if anything, because this is nonsense. Anyway, I don't know if there's anything else. Otherwise, we'll wrap right at a minute or an hour and 29 minutes. So kept it under 90 minutes. Take that, Hollywood. Make a 90-minute movie again, please, finally. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.